I was very annoyed that companies were collecting data about me. I couldn't see it. I had no control over it, and they were making money on it, and I was cut out of that deal. And I thought this is a bad deal for me as a consumer. So, hence I like the idea that we're bringing the consumer back in with our product.
Hey, Guy Powell here, and welcome to the next episode of the Backstory on Marketing and AI. And of course, if you haven't already done so, please visit prorelevant.com and sign up for all of these episodes and podcasts. As you know, I am the author of the upcoming book, The AI Marketing Machine. And you can find more information on that at marketingmachine.prorelevant.com. And it's very, very close. I am within weeks, just a few short weeks. And if you'd like, the first chapter is now up there for download at marketingmachine.prorelevant.com. Today, I'm interviewing, though, Theed Loader, and he is the co-founder and CTO of Rewarded Interest. And I'm really looking forward to this. But let me tell you a little bit more about Theed. He is a multi-startup entrepreneur and is co-founder and CTO of Rewarded Interest. And for over 30 years, Theed has been building services for consumers and enterprises that make the internet safer and better. Wow, that is a big deal and really awesome. I'm so looking forward to speaking with you. Welcome, Theed. Good to have you.
Before we go any further, a quick pause. This is important. Your sales force is one of the most expensive investments in your company. The real question isn't who's likely to buy someday, it's who should be called right now to create the most value. Traditional propensity models tell you who might convert. Our prescriptive modeling, called COPA, tells you who will convert because you called them. If you manage a large sales organization and want higher conversion, bigger deals, and better use of every rep hour, let's talk. If you want your sales team focused on the calls that matter most, visit prescriptivemodeling.prorelevant.com and set up a short strategy session.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Guy.
Absolutely. So, how did you get into this really cool stuff of AI and marketing? What's your backstory?
Wow. Let's see. So I got hooked on the internet while I was still in college in the early 90s. And when I graduated in 93, I thought, gosh, I can't imagine working in any place or anywhere where I didn't have internet access. This was before you could have internet access brought to your home. You needed a modem, you needed to dial into a place to do it. But I helped a nonprofit get online and help set up their networks and things and taught myself some system administration with Unix computers in the early 90s. Went out to California for a short stint in grad school. And that was right at the beginning of the dot-com boom. So I ended up leaving grad school, going to work for one of the very first dot-coms, which was a company called Electric Classifieds. And their goal was to basically bring most of the major or most of the major classifieds that existed in newspaper context. So think of housing.com, cars.com, house.com, right? Housing. And then they decided to do a dating service or a matchmaking service first, which was a mirror of the newspaper personals. And that product was match.com. And so I was very early on at Match. And that was right at the beginning of kind of the consumer internet boom, the first dot-com boom in essence. And so I was out in California when that was going on and worked out of our offices in South of Market. And then about a year later, two guys from Match, we left and started an engineering professional services company doing internet products. And so basically never looked back.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah, and Match, what a great way to get started in your career with after graduating and then partially grad school. Fantastic. So tell us about rewarded interest.
Sure. Sure. So I went back to grad school from 2002 to 2005, and I was my undergrad was in mechanical engineering, and I thought, gosh, I'm doing things with the internet and with computers. I'd already been a CTO and a app server architect, but I didn't actually have computer science as a background. So I thought, well, I should probably go back and actually learn the trade. and I wouldn't learn all the theory unless I went to university. So I went back. That drove my return to Michigan. Um, but while I was there, I was in this cross-disciplinary program that also included economics and information economics. And it was there that I got exposure to some ideas there, like signaling and screening, and price differentiation and information optionality, and some other ideas which really kind of they don't they're ethereal in that they don't necessarily have a concrete form, but you can use them like you would use beams or rivets or materials when you're building a bridge, right? So they're sort of the stuff that you can design other things out of. And so for a research project, I started looking into the economics of email spam, which in the early 2000s, spam was really starting to become a really bad problem. And it still is a problem, but it's for most of us, it's not as bad as it was even then. And what I had sort of dawned on me that, and this was me as a person who was naive to such things as opposed to other people who were well versed in it. But unwanted email, think of it as junk mail, right? As we might receive at our house via the post office, and unwanted email communication is essentially mistargeted marketing, right?
Mhm.
And so when you think about, spam as marketing, it might be that, for 99% of the population, or maybe, I don't know, 80% of the population, at the time, the sort of the joke was the ads about Cialis and erectile dysfunction and all of those were the ones that were very the most spammy, right? But I thought, okay, that doesn't apply to me, but clearly someone's buying this medication, right? And if the sender had a way to know that I didn't care about that, then they could reduce their costs, however little they are, and not actually send me the email. So I thought if information could be made available at the right cost that would allow marketers to self-curate or self-edit the level of reach of their communication, then consumers wouldn't get unwanted solicitation and marketers wouldn't have unneeded spend. And part of the problem with email was that the cost of sending a message to somebody was fractions of a penny instead of sending junk mail where it might have cost $1 to send somebody a piece of physical mail. So the costs involved in sending junk mail were in a way limiting or they caused the marketers to curate or self-regulate. But on the internet, those costs were, 1,000 times less. And so you had a rapid proliferation of junk mail. That got me very interested in infoecon. And so I went back to the Bay Area after grad school and I started a company to do permission-based email marketing. And that ultimately, I'll skip the details on that, but it suffice to say the idea was create an environment and the right circumstances where consumers' taste, their interests, their information could become available to marketers, and marketers could essentially buy the right to deliver a message to the consumer at the consumer's chosen price point. So the consumer had a dial that they could dial up or dial down depending on how much inbound solicitation they wanted. And so today, rewarded interest, it is similar in effect. So now, in the last 20 years, digital media, and again here, online advertising, so videos on YouTube, paid display media, paid video on TikTok or Instagram, right? This is all digital media. It has grown from a sub $1 billion industry to a multi-hundred billion dollar industry, right? To creating the likes of the Facebooks and the Googles as these massive companies that help orchestrate communication between brands and marketers and out to consumers and businesses. And so ad tech, as it's now called, right? And particularly for display media, which I'll talk about as maybe our first medium or part of that market, does hundreds of billions of dollars a year in paid messaging, paid media. So what rewarded interest does is it addresses some key consumer problems that have arisen in this digital media universe. And so one of them is the need to acquire consent from consumers under the various regulations for privacy that creates a friction experience for consumers. So the example is cookie banners or cookie consent banners. You want to learn about your favorite or you want to go to a blogger and you're looking up like the best way to make spaghetti sauce, or maybe it's barbecue, whatever it is. When you arrive at that website, very often you get essentially almost like a sign or a barrier that prevents you from entering the site and seeing the content. You have to say, oh yeah, I'm willing to accept tracking and targeting, or I'm willing to be targeted for these reasons or not, or something like allow all, block all, right? Customize. So our rewarded interest, you tell us once what your preferences are around such things as being tracked and targeted, and we intercept those messages or those dialogues that come at you, those pop-ups, and we essentially fill them out for you. So you go as the consumer straight to the website content, and you no longer have to deal with these cookie pop-ups. So that is the core value proposition of our product. But now there's another twist, and that is marketers and let's say online advertisers, and marketers are advertisers in this context. They want their ads to perform well. They are competing against other ad buyers. And so all ad buyers would prefer to reach just the audience that's relevant to their product. It turns out consumers want the same thing. Consumers want targeted ads and not untargeted ads. Untargeted ads are noise. They're junk. They're annoying. Really targeted ads become information. And a consumer it can think, gosh, I didn't even know about that product, but it's exactly what I want. They go buy it. Everybody's happy. So what we're doing is we are solving the advertisers' problem simultaneously with the consumers. And the advertiser problem is they don't always have permission to track and target a consumer, and they can't always tie a particular visit of a consumer to a set of tastes about that consumer. So if you're the advertising platforms and you have to choose, maybe you have just 100 milliseconds to choose which ad to show a consumer when they land on a web page, you need information to be able to place the right ad that's going to perform. And the way that's done is with what's called advertising identity is part of it. And it's like a handle on a bucket. Okay. So the handle is just a numerical identity. But when that is passed to the ad platforms by your browser, the ad platforms can go and look up all this extra information that has become associated with that numerical identity. And then they can look at that block of information, which might include other purchases you've made, other websites that you visited. And that information can help them know what ad to show you. And so that having that ID, that handle on that bucket is extremely valuable. It can be worth 50% more of the ad price. So the advertisers are willing to pay more when they can target. And that means the publishers who are going to show you those ads when you visit their website, they make more money. So what rewarded interest does is we offer that identity with the consumer's permission, and we compensate the consumer for being willing to provide it. And we do that by basically charging the advertisers. We say, you want ID, you got to pay for it. Here's the consumer's ID. If you win and you're the one who actually displays the ad, then you've got to pay 10% of what you paid for the ad to us. And we split that in half and give half of it directly to the consumer.
Quick pause. This is important for any marketing leader. Marketing must continuously prove its value or the budgets dry up. Marketing mix models provide that proof in a way finance and leadership can believe. And we at ProRelevant help teams answer critical questions. Which campaigns actually worked? Which channels really moved the needle? And where should the next dollar go? With over 20 years of experience across complex marketing environments, we know how to deliver clarity, not guesswork. To learn more, go to mmm.prorelevant.com and set up a short strategy session. And now, back to the podcast.
Hmm. Wow. That is there's a lot to unpack there. That is really interesting. And you know, because those banners are constantly at the bottom of the page, I don't know, the top of the page or whatever, and and it's asking for permission. And I'm always wondering if I say no, I don't want my cook, I don't want you to, set a cookie, then does that limit the information that I'm trying to get out of the site? And I've never run into, and I usually just say yes because I don't want to be limited, but I've never run into a situation necessarily where it says, well, you have to accept cookies to get this further information. So right now, it doesn't seem like the publishers are actually using that information as a gate, so as a consumer, then I don't, I'll just turn everything off. I'm still going to get the same amount of information. Why do I care?
Right. Well, so and that does I'll say we have an answer to that in effect, right? No, most publishers don't have a cookie wall. Instead, they might have a paywall, as in you can't get the content at all unless you agree to
Right.
become a member and pay your $4 a year or $4 a month or whatever it is. But some people have thought, oh, if I don't give them the ability to track me or to deliver personalized ads, which basically means profile and then use the profile to choose the ads, they think maybe I'll get fewer ads. And that basically is not true. Like the advertiser, the publisher is still trying to make money back. They just make less when the ads aren't targeted. And what it means for the consumer is the consumer gets, the value of those ads declines even further. They're not informational, they're mistargeted. Unless it's something like toilet paper, which basically everybody needs, right? So you don't need targeting to sell, let's say, Coca-Cola and toilet paper or maybe coffee, right? But if it's a niche product, the only way you can really even afford to advertise as an advertiser is if you can limit the distribution of what you're talking about, limit the distribution of your message to just those people who are most likely to
Mm,
be receptive. And so one of the consequences, if we succeed in getting a very large pool of consumers on our product, it actually has this great benefit to commerce, which is more products will get designed that can be delivered to the niche audiences because the information about how to reach those niche audiences is now available. So the right products get created, they get delivered to the people who actually want them, and advertisers who could not afford to advertise before can now use digital media as a way to reach people, and they can do it profitably. So you end up getting the industry gets bigger, consumers are better served.
yeah, but now, me as a consumer, um, two things. One, there's the advertiser side and the consumer side. But so do I get to choose my preferences, or are those then kind of chosen for me based on what my activities have been? So I've gone to Adidas.com and Nike.com, and therefore I must be, somebody that's interested in sports. Because I could imagine most people, well, not most people, many people would say, well, I just don't want any of these damn ads. I'm just going to turn myself off and I'm going to be a curmudgeon and sit in the corner. And I don't want to see any of these ads.
Yes, and frankly, there are a couple of things to unpack there, but there is a class of extension or a class of software out there called an ad blocker, right?
Mm.
And those have become quite popular. Maybe 10%, 15% of the population in US and Europe, they might have an ad blocker installed. And really the result of really high what's called ad loads, which is basically the number and level of obnoxiousness of ads that are on certain publisher websites, a few ads here and there on the side, on the top, not kind of in your face all the time. Most consumers are okay with that and aren't too bothered, right? But if the ad load on the page is really high, or those ads like hover right over the body of the article that you're trying to read, and you have to interact with them in order to actually read what you wanted to read, that can really turn people off, and people won't go back to that publisher potentially, right? The ad blockers, it's what's interesting about them is Some of them will actually charge you, like, let's say, a monthly fee. Others, they say, oh, we're free to use. What they're doing is they are blocking the ads that are shown by the publishers themselves, and then they go off and sell that ad space at a discount to somebody else, and then they pocket some of that money. So the consumers sometimes they still end up seeing ads. It's just that the publishers are actually making less money now, and some of that money is going to the ad blocker. Um, so
Gotta love
yeah, I
it.
mean, we think of ourselves in part as the antidote to an ad blocker. If you're a publisher, the publisher community, they're losing revenue when those ad blockers and consumers arrive who have ad blockers because they're no longer selling their ads. So if a consumer can get better ads and be compensated by using rewarded interest, when those consumers show up at a publisher's website, the publisher sells better ads at a higher price point. So we've tried to align ourselves more with the publisher side and also the demand side platforms, which are the buying platforms the advertisers use to procure those ads. So
Mm.
in our design, the consumer finally has a seat at the table, and everybody else, I wouldn't say everybody, the key parties that matter that are in the value chain, they all do better off when our users are using our product.
One thing on the advertiser side is, certainly I want to target very specific people, and let's say that they're in rewarded interest, and I can have that target. But there's also then other folks that are probably in my target that are not being or totally blocked or whatever, and yet I still need to reach them because they're still a potential prospect for me. And how do you see any of that working out?
Yeah, so in there, and this is less of my area of expertise, but I know that there are, what are called lookalike audiences where you can use AI to,
Right.
let's say you have a group of consumers who you can identify and you can see some of the distinguishing characteristics. I mean, there can be tens of thousands of variables, as you might, as these platforms instrument and track what a consumer does. It doesn't necessarily involve your name, and it might not involve anything that you've explicitly declared yourself as a consumer. So, like back to the shoe analogy, you haven't said, I'm interested in shoes. They're inferring that you're interested in shoes because you visited Nike and Adidas, right? Or you're interested in sports, as you put it. Um, but you can look alike model, and if you have a few data points about other people who aren't in that initial audience, you might be able to find characteristics in the labeled audience, and then kind of extrapolate and say, here are people where we don't know as much about them, but they do share these similar characteristics. Maybe they have some of the same tastes in things that they might wish to buy, right? And you can expand if you're the marketer, you can buy those segments, is sometimes what they're called, but they're basically lists of identities with these
Yeah.
characteristics. And there's some signal there that might make you think these consumers, when reached, will outperform the general audience and yet still and therefore still be profitable for me given my costs.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Makes sense. It's interesting. With AI too, though, quite understand exactly how the AI works. But if I'm using, ChatGPT and I'm putting in different queries and prompt and I'm looking for, I'm doing a search on footwear or whatever, I'm wondering, how the AI uses that now personal information about what I just searched on to then feed that back into somehow for the advertisers to target you in some fashion. Any thoughts on that or?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. A couple things. One is, or two threads to pull on here. One is that the accumulation of your prompts as an indication of what you're interested in, right? And then what will the chatbot companies, how will they collect it and what will they use it for, right? If they're kind of good at their trade and they really decide we are going to lean in heavily towards advertising as a source of revenue, then absolutely they will be collecting that information, storing it and building it into ways that it can be used to do that, to do targeting,
Mm,
which then they can say to advertisers, if you pay us, you can essentially rig the outcome, right? Make it somewhat more likely that an ad for your product will be shown based on this possible match. And there's obviously a tightrope they have to walk there, because if the consumers feel like they're no longer getting genuine results, then the consumer might say, I don't trust the AI anymore, and they might stop asking it questions, right? So if you do that well, then the information that is given back to the consumer, maybe the results of their prompt and a response from the AI, if it's very well articulated, oh, we noticed that you're doing research on a trip to New Zealand and that you like hiking. We took the liberty to find three hiking boot providers. Here's Merrill and here's whatever, right? These are making products that might be suitable for the Milford Trek, right? Or whatever it is, right? So that could be felt considered by the consumer as, okay, this is actually helpful, right? It may not be quite what I asked, but it's helpful, right?
yeah, yeah.
The other facet of this is the notion of permission. And this is something we really focus on. We are with our product, we're gathering the consumer's tastes or preferences around the propagation of information that can be collected about them, right? First, do you want me to let it collect it at all? And B, if you do collect information about me as a consumer, what can you do with it? And so we call this consent, right? And there are various requirements by law. There's the GDPR requirements in Europe. There's the CPRA in California. Now I think there's like 22 other states that have passed privacy
Hmm.
laws. So in the context of AI, when you're interacting with the chatbot and it's recording all of these things that you say, right? It can share some of that information, the chatbot can, when it goes out and tries to fulfill your search or your query. So remember, the chatbots can talk to MCP servers or they can talk to other chatbots to try to fulfill the consumer's request. So then the question is, what amount of information gathered from your prompts do you as a consumer want passed on to these other parties? And what controls do you have around that? So we're now leaning into that and thinking consumers are going to move, are already moving from the open web and traditional blogs, media sites, publishers, et cetera, and they're moving towards chatbots, right? And so the chatbots need to be able to understand what the consumer's consent preferences are, and to then act accordingly as they will communicate on your behalf as the consumer.
Yeah. Well, and that I think that's hopefully where it's going to go. I think there's definitely some going back and forth at the moment, but it seems like as things get more sophisticated, you as the consumer could hopefully at some point gain control over what's going on.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny, I was thinking too, one of our clients, they have their own calls and chatbots and whatever, and so then they have a lot of PII, and then attached to that is maybe some unstructured textual data or even audio data that gets converted. And one of the challenges that they have is they want to be able to analyze that unstructured data and then use that in whatever fashion, in a propensity model or something like that. And but they have to be very careful because that information can't be necessarily passed on because somebody might have put PII in there, and that needs to somehow be filtered out. Do you see that as coming into the equation as well, or is that now a totally different area?
No, I mean, I think, for us, particularly with our product, we don't collect any information about consumers. So in effect, we don't have that problem. We are only sharing the ID out in the world, and then everybody else who knows how to track and accumulate information based on ID, they're able to do that. But all of those parties and all of what we would call a first party, like a retailer, as they have a developer and build a relationship directly with a consumer, there will absolutely be PII in those communications. And so, yeah, if they feed that to a chatbot or to an LLM, Some of that information can leak or it can end up back in the responses. There are a number of security related issues there and privacy concerns. And so I'd say there's awareness of this in the industry. Um, there's a lot of pressure to move fast and break things, right? So even the big LLM providers, I suspect they know that they're not acquiring adequate consent
Yeah.
to be able to share the consumer's data, but there's this pressure to move fast. So I suspect that this will get addressed in the coming years, and there will be paper trails and there will be standards that are used to govern the communication and propagation of personal information.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and hopefully it's not going to be regulated by the governments. I mean, I don't know. I mean, some of the governments are faster than others, but by the time they get a regulation out there, whatever it is, it'll be so out of date it won't matter. So it really then if it does get to some level of recommendation, I would imagine that it would have to come from an industry group or something like that to put together some rules that people can sign up to. So, do you see that happening, or is that?
Yes, yeah, I see it happening. I've participated. I chaired a standards organization about 5, 10 years ago, and it is herding cats, right? There's a lot of politics involved, but really great things can come from it. I think maybe kind of reading into your point, right? Um, Poorly crafted regulations could do a lot of damage, right?
Mm,
And the industry, by its nature, and that it's on the ground every day dealing with various kinds of friction, people in industry are going to have a very good sense of the economic damage or fallout that can occur from poor regulations. So it's very much in the industry's best interest to, come to go back to regulators, let's say, and say, here's how we'd like you to do it, right? Can we achieve your goals of, protecting consumers, transparency and agency, whatever those requirements are, but can we do it in a way leveraging technology where we don't add so much friction that we kill the business? Right? And so I think that we'll see a lot of those efforts, particularly around consent and propagation of personal data.
yeah. Well, is that already? It seems like though with GDPR in Europe, it seems like they're further along in terms of allowing the management of your own personal data. Is that true? And is it now uh, far enough along to handle your personal data even in the AI space, or is it still got a ways to go there?
Interesting. I mean, I'd say they are in a way they're already on to their second variation, right? So they're considering now amendments to GDPR, and it's been 9 years. So I
Mm,
think yeah, Europe has definitely put something out there. It was ambitious. It caused a lot of collateral damage, but also the industry kind of got around, kind of figured it out. There are some problems, and changes are being proposed. Let's say to continue to to be able to give consumers the rights and a way to exercise those rights and have the protections, but without causing so much friction that it's bad for business. So I'd say it's evolving. The nice thing is, by being the runner-up or chasing the taillights, as I like to say, in the US for the various states that are doing privacy laws, they're able to model some of the things that they propose after what's already been shown to work, right?
mm,
So, a great example here would be just as a data right, you might have as a consumer the right to inspect or get a copy of all of the data that a company holds on you, right? And that, the companies in the past might have thought, oh, we collected this data, so it's ours. So that's kind of not true anymore, right? You've collected the data, but it's about the consumer, and the consumer has clawed it back by law, and now the consumer and you jointly own that data, right? And that I think is a big shift in the mindset of companies. But I think most consumers would agree this is a good thing. This is information collected about me. You're holding it. I should have a right to get a copy of it. Um, I think in the California CPRA, consumers have a right to request deletion of that data.
mm,
They can also restrict and say, you can have this data and you can use it, but you can't sell it to anybody else. And that's interesting because if a consumer can get a copy and they can restrict redistribution, of data collected about them, the consumer, in theory, could aggregate all this data about themselves and push it back into the market and sell it.
Hmm.
And that was actually one of the inspirations for rewarded interest. That's what kind of drew me to it. I like to say that this is sort of an aside, but I like to say what got me motivated to start rewarded interest was anger. And now I kind of pursue what we're doing out of love, because I realize if we do this right, it's one of those things where everybody can win. But when we got started, I was very annoyed that companies were collecting data about me. I couldn't see it. I had no control over it, and they were making money on it, and I was cut out of that deal. And I thought this is a bad deal for me as a consumer. So, hence I like the idea that we're bringing the consumer back in with our product.
Well, it's fascinating how that's working, and I guess if I wanted to though go out as a consumer today, and I wanted to control or have you delete, I want to go to Coca-Cola and have you delete, all your cookie data that you have on me. Um, I don't know if I could do that, because I probably went to thousands and thousands of sites, and I don't even know who they all are. And of course, I never read that agreement that you agree to do blah blah blah. And so they're probably selling my stuff to another thousands and thousands of companies. And so the need for what you're doing is definitely there, but as an individual, it's probably impossible to get control of your data.
And that's a great insight. And you're right. Just because, back to the notion of data rights, just because you're given a right doesn't mean you can cost effectively execute it, right? And kind of the idea that there's data out there about you in all these places, you don't even have a list of what those places are, let alone have a lever to pull for each one, right? And this is why the way we and my business partner Scott had this insight. This is why the way we bring the consumer to get them to the table, if you will, to give them that seat at the table, the bargaining power by using identity is actually so powerful. So, what does it take to deliver a really well targeted personalized ad? Well, you need to have access to the data about that person who will be the viewer of that ad, right? The actor. There's data out there about you and I all over the place, right? So there's plenty of data. The problem is, how do you get access to the right data about that person at the right moment? And that's why the handle on the bucket is so important. You need to be able to pick it up and look inside, right? And so our identity, we think of the data being out there in the wild as sort of the complement to the value of the identity, which is used to retrieve it at the last second. So we charge for that, right? We charge for use of that identity, which is kind of
Mm,
like the index. It's like the card in the card catalog. It's the library's full of books, but if you can't figure out which shelf the book's on, right, then it might as well not exist. So we think of we'll probably we're going to give away the measurement use cases, allow the profiles to be built by having the ad tech ecosystem accumulate information about what you're doing and where you've been. And the way that that information is ultimately monetized is to provide a targeted ad. And for that, we charge the ID at that last second.
yeah, yeah,
So,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, just fascinating. I there's so many, thoughts going through my mind right now, and yeah, and I'm glad somebody's doing something on this. So hopefully we'll see you in the news. You'll be up there with Mark Zuckerberg and I'm going to control your information. But anyway, I'd love to keep going. We've got to kind of break. We're about at the end of our time. I
Oh,
do have
wow.
one last question for you, and that is, what advice would you give a new and up and coming marketer that's about to enter into this fun space of AI and marketing?
I love that question. I'll say I'm an engineer and computer scientist by background, but as a entrepreneur, I am necessarily having to become a marketer. And I think it's a fantastic time to be marketing. There are many different media, there are many different tools. right? There's data, there's experiments to be done. And a friend of mine who is a CMO kind of hammered this out for me. We're like, you have to be willing to experiment. That means you're going to have to deploy budget. You're going to have to find out what works. The goal is the same, which is can you find a cost-effective way to reach the right customer, right, or a customer effectively with the right message at the right time, right? And that has not changed in 50 years, right? But today with AI, right, and chatbots and AI as a tool to do optimization or to help you with creative, right? Some of the things that were difficult in the past are just becoming a lot easier. And now the goal is I need to, is to figure out and run the experiments, have the discipline, figure out what works, be a scientist.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I really like that answer too, because I think the marketers of the past that were thinking about creative and, maybe more design related, it's no longer about that. It's yes, you have to have the good design, but you also have to understand the consumer and how you can then connect those two, and that's where kind of the science of the industry comes together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, when I was doing Match.com, there was basically, and this is again the early 90s, mid 90s, there was email, there was the web, and there was the telephone, and there was snail mail, right? Four media basically, right? And now, or five, or I didn't count, but four or five. But now, there's add in Facebook, add in Instagram, add in TikTok, right? Add in Reddit, right? There are now, hundreds of different media, and which of those media are a watering hole equivalent for the people who actually care about your product, right? That's it. It's way harder than it has been.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it is incredible how hard it is, and that's the good news for me because that we love the complexity. So that's
You're a
if it were
guide.
easy, it used to be, and this is way even before my time. It used to be there were three television stations, and you just had to figure out which one was doing better for you. And now, there's like 35 different options just on TikTok on what you can do.
Yeah.
So
You know,
yeah,
what's nice though, of course, the flip side, right, for the consumer is you can go find your people, right? Yeah, I remember, back in the mid 80s when I was growing up and I was in high school, I would go into the local drugstore and I would see the magazines, right? There was a magazine rack. And, in the early 80s, maybe there were 40 magazines on there. By the late 80s, there were, hundreds of magazines on there because the magazine industry had figured out like how do we go niche to be able to bring out the advertisers who want to advertise to that niche. And I remember just thinking this is so cool, right? The challenge of course becomes cultural. How do we all get common information that sort of allows us to stay united, right? When we're all kind of burrowed into our niches for the rest of what we do.
yeah, and that's a discussion for another time. So, but for today, this was I was just fascinating. So, Theed, thank you so much, and thank you for participating today and being on the podcast, and really appreciate it. So, where can folks learn more about you and your company?
Yeah, sure. They can go to rewardedinterest.com. It's our website, describes the product. Our product is today available for Chrome and Chromium-like browsers. And we will soon have a desktop Safari and Firefox. And we're about to pilot the iOS mobile Safari part of our product. So if you thought cookie banners and cookie pop-ups were annoying on desktop, most people know that they're twice as annoying on a smaller screen, smaller format phone. And so our goal is to give you back the convenience of the internet, make your experience better, and ultimately give you some rewards for allowing personalization.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And
Thank you,
for
Brad.
the audience, definitely stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on marketing and AI. And of course, go to marketingmachine.prorelevant.com and you'll be able to sign up for my upcoming book, The AI Marketing Machine. And you'll also be able to download the first chapter of my book, The AI Marketing Machine. Theed, thank you so much. It's been great to have you today.
Guy, thanks very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. You've had great questions. Have been totally enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, me too, for certain. Thank you.